Hi, my name is Tamara Davila, and I'm going to be talking to you about the community of Austin, Texas. The history of Austin, Texas begins in the 1700s when nomadic tribes inhabited the areas of Barton Springs. Austin was actually named Waterloo first. It was not declared the capital of Texas until 1839. And the University of Texas, which has their main campus in Austin, started classes in the fall of 1881. In the 1950s, laboratories and large technological companies started to flood the city, such as like Google, Apple, and even Dell. And to this day, that is still prevalent. Austin has a way of thinking called the Austin frame of mind, which was coined in the 1970s when environmental conservation became a popular issue. And then in that same era, Austin also became a live music city, and this started when Willie Nelson and other artists came to the area and started playing in local bars. Austin now. You might be wondering what Austin looks like now. So currently we have about 2.3 million residents, and the average age is about 37 years old. We're still a big city on live music and technology. We have a lot of music festivals and even a festival in March called South by Southwest that caters to music and technology. A lot of the tech companies will roll out their new innovations during that time. A big part of Austin, as well as I mentioned, was the Austin frame of mind. Something that attributes to that is just eating healthy. There are a lot of organic supermarkets here. A lot of people prefer that. They want to eat organic and farmers market style foods. And there are a lot of hospitals prevalent in the area, and I'll go through more in detail about that in a minute. Some structural issues in Austin. Overall, the city has been addressing these issues, but unfortunately, because of the exponential population growth, the infrastructure of the city it hasn't been able to keep up. So a big issue that we have right now is traffic. There are two major highways in Austin, and neither of those highways have the proper laneage for the amount of people using those highways. And this tends to make people late to work, just late to events, and it's very frustrating. So that's something that needs to get worked on in the future in order to improve Austin. Some more structural issues regarding Austin includes housing. So as I have said, the population in Austin is growing exponentially, and right now we only have about 6 weeks left of available housing for the rate of growth that we have. And on top of that, we have a lot of people coming to Austin from California, which is great. But because of the cost of living differences, people from California are able to buy homes for much less than what they were used to. And then they're going around and selling them for way higher. This is pushing out a lot of the local Austin community members, and it's causing a lot of issues. So, some regulations for housing would be great. I think this would help the community, especially the community that's been here for a long time. Issues regarding population. Well, as I stated earlier, the population is exponentially growing. Because of this, and then the housing issue as well, we have a large homeless population. Austin is great about having homeless shelters for these people, but the shelters can only hold such a high capacity. So, a lot of people, if you drive around Austin in areas that have large highways, you'll see homeless people actually camping underneath the highways. This causes a lot of issues for just general safety and health. So, as far as health related issues that I found it very interesting that the people I talked to in the community actually described more of heart disease type issues, and I found that this was not one of the most prevalent things discussed in the actual literature. For example, the literature discussed cancer related issues, and I find a lot more people have heart disease. Austin does have it's called the Austin Heart Hospital, and it's a hospital specifically for cardiac patients. Another thing I found that there's a large diabetic population in Austin, and this is also something that's not discussed in any of the literature. Now, as far as access, acceptability, and affordability in the Austin area. I feel that the access is amazing. There are a lot of health resources for the community. There's many facilities, there's specialized care, primary care, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's a problem in the community at all. I do think that as far as like acceptability, that is a problem. I think a lot of people will delay care until it is absolutely necessary and they are deadly dire of medical care. This has to do with the affordability and people's lack of insurance. So I believe that there is a decent amount of hospitals that have a good affordability, but because Austin has hospitals on every side of the city, some of these hospitals are for profit hospitals and they are known to have larger amounts of copays and procedures that cost lots more money, so about half or double the price, I should say. As far as Healthy People 2020, three things that I think are important to the Austin community are the first being reduced fatal injuries. Why, you ask? Well, Texas has one of the largest rates of death by motor vehicle accidents. And I'm not sure what contributes to that, if it's just the area or the population. But I feel like this is something that needs to be worked on because this is a big issue. We need to help get these deaths down, especially for things that can be avoided. The second thing I want to talk about is increase the proportion of people with medical insurance. This is important because I feel like a lot of people don't seek medical care because they simply don't have the medical insurance. And in order to better our community, I feel like we need to either educate people on cheaper medical insurances that they can get or work on getting people working so they can afford medical insurance. And then finally, increasing the proportion of adults that receive colorectal cancer screens. Why is this important? Especially which I haven't really touched base on cancer too much, but if you look at the literature, it shows that the number one cause of death in Austin is cancer, and specifically colon cancer. So, in order to combat this, we have to go for it with preventative care. As far as environmental issues, Austin really has not, no environmental issues. The biggest thing that I found was there's a preach and a move for the Austin frame of mind and, recycling, eating healthy, and being outdoors, which is awesome because a lot of people live that lifestyle. However, the groceries in our supermarkets over here are very expensive, especially if you're looking to eat organically or you're just trying to be healthier. I find that things are quite expensive if you want to go that route. And as far as government issues, I'd say that Austin has a pretty decent community based political system. However, one thing that I did notice that a lot of the community are really big on going to things like rallies or outside events. But as far as like the nitty gritty, sit down in a meeting and listen to what the politicians are discussing, I don't think enough of the community is getting involved in that. And I really think that's where our efforts should be because that's where all the decision making happens. So, my top three community needs, the first is the affordability of healthcare. I believe this is the most important because if you can't afford to receive healthcare, you're not going to seek it. And that's just kind of how, the bottom line is. A lot of people in this community, they have families and, maybe they're struggling at work and or they don't even have a job. So at the end of the day, the most important thing for you is to take care of your family and or have food on the table or have food in general. So I think making healthcare more affordable will help people seek out healthcare. The second most important thing to me is acceptability of healthcare. Another issue I notice is that patients don't take healthcare as seriously as they should, or they don't go to the doctor regularly, and it's not just because they can't afford it, but it's also because they don't realize how serious some of these things are. And it's until they're too late, they have a heart attack or unfortunately cancer. But I think that we need to really focus on accepting healthcare and seeking it out. The third thing that I think is a huge priority is housing. As I was talking about earlier, the population growth here is just growing and growing. Unfortunately, if we don't get more housing or figure out a better way to regulate housing, we will have no homes for the new population in 6 weeks. We'll run out. And obviously, we can't do that if the city is going to keep to grow. We need places to house these families. And the last three, so four, five, and six of my priorities are more affordable, healthy options. I think that Austin is great with promoting living a healthy lifestyle. However, I think a lot of the supermarkets have unrealistic pricing. And in order for us to preach this and force, people to really consider eating healthier, we need to be able to give them affordable food options. Not everybody can afford to spend $5 on a gallon of milk. Like, that's just not realistic. The fifth thing that I think is a priority is in regards to the culture of Austin, and that has to do with the local residents being pushed out by people from other states. And I don't think it's an issue of the local residents don't want to welcome new people, because everyone is very friendly here. I just think that as far as keeping the culture, the original culture of Austin, I feel it's very important to make sure that we are kind of holding on to some of the authenticness of Austin. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we're allowing those residents and those families that have lived here their entire lives to still live here their entire lives. And whether that be with regulations on pricings for housings or some sort of grandfather to help these families stay in the Austin area, I don't know, but I do know that something in that nature needs to happen. Finally, the last thing that I think is a priority for Austin is the traffic patterns, and that just goes back to adding more streets, or excuse me, not streets, but roads on the highway, and trying to alleviate some of that stress with the driving, because right now a lot of the local business people are having a hard time getting to work, and it's definitely affecting businesses over here in Austin. Well, thank you so much for listening to my slideshow, and I hope you have a great week.